Hello, I'm the Deer Runner, and in this analysis video, I will be analyzing what caused the zombie apocalypse in the 7 Days to Die video game, which I will be calling it the energy source. This will be a several-part research project, which this episode will be the introduction, just identifying that the energy source exists and to clearly show it is responsible for the zombie apocalypse, which later videos I will go into more detail. When you press new game, clearly the state you find the world in looks to be a recent fall of humanity. Damaged newspapers exposed to the elements, being partially legible, those random areas, electricity is on, the fireplaces still have hot coals, dead farm plants still standing, and nature hasn't retaken human settlements. But that recent fall of humanity theory completely breaks down, as you can observe the abandoned cars rusting and the paint chipping away everywhere, showing an extreme level of time. Probably decades has passed for those things, which means everything mentioned before should have rotted away by now. Yet both are there at the same time. Even after 7,000 days past in game, everything remains preserved. Therefore, there is something that has basically infected everything around and is strongly preserving them. But since I am looking for what I call the energy source, I'm just going to study the electricity and the burned wood that both basically won't stop showing energy. To start with, the electricity, in the most basic terms, electricity around the world is maintained by varying levels of power producing structures working together to keep electricity levels in a range that our technology can use. Even so, some of these power-producing stations could maintain themselves for a period of time after humans abandon it, and might automatically adjust the power output, increasing it to keep the electricity levels in a normal range. This wouldn't last as does in this game as remaining on indefinitely, which there is an entire region known as the Wasteland that is bombed out, destroyed areas, which clearly there would be no possible way the technology to carry that electricity was intact, even if somehow humanity kept the power stations operational, which those buildings' internal power generators would have ran out a long time ago. Yet the lights remain on even in standalone small devices such as flashlights, and energy is maintaining cars' batteries that should have drained away by now, becoming unusable within a year, as this still should have been attached to cars when abandoned. With how clearly there are signs everywhere, the humans didn't have time to properly store them long term, so something anomalous is giving electricity to these pieces of technology. It is clear this power source is invisible with how the electronics are just on with nothing that can explain it. But despite the power source is not what is normally there, the infected electronics are running normally, which is especially pronounced with how its servers indicator lights show what seem to be normal enough operation, which with how if about anything with electricity inside the computers isn't right, it would not work well and probably not work at all. So whatever this power source is had to have made a near perfect copy for servers to be running at all. Since the unknown energy source copied a normal operating state, this strongly indicates it was infected before the zombie apocalypse, when it was being used under normal conditions, allowing it to gradually build up and match the ways electricity normally moves through it, or they'd be broken. Also, electronics acting very weird would have had people thrown them away, so had to have looked normal for them to be everywhere. Therefore, a slow, gradual infection. And lastly, it's clear the lights never burn out, therefore it preserves them. You were able to tear apart infected devices, breaking them down to normal-looking components. But with how much infectious material must have built up to copy the normal energy levels, you probably only in that case removed the obvious signs they were infected, which also means many things that show no obvious signs of infection may be infected, which already is easily observed as practically everything is being significantly preserved. Now I'll compare this set of observations to the burning and smoldering wood to see about the same equation is there, but the medium that is used allows certain aspects to be more pronounced, to give us a much more robust list of what the energy source is. You can see, just like the electronics, there is nothing visible that can explain the constant heat and the fire that comes from the wood. As time goes by, they also never dissipate in energy regardless of weather conditions or time that passes, which is the same for electricity, being constantly replaced, and no matter how long the wood burns, it never decays, which shows the preservation ability is shared between them. With how the lights in electrical components never burn out. But this time, the never decay attribute also applies to the structures surrounding the heat source, not being destroyed by the constant high heat, confirming they have the non-decay attribute of this energy source, despite not showing any abnormal energy state themselves. Which, since there are clearly plenty of partially burned buildings, with sections not burned away that contain about every possible thing resisting being burned away when normally they should be, then that clearly shows everything is infected, but most don't show obvious signs they are. All the fire and smoldering piles also are what would have been expected under normal conditions, as if whatever is maintaining the energy in them is mimicking what was there at a certain point in time. They were being burned, sort of similar to the electricity proper power levels are maintained from a past normal state. Though this one was much quicker, copying a state only being for a short period of time instead of the long time it had for the electrical components, complex electrical systems, but since the terms are more complex in how energy moves through them, we can expect what caused the energy source copying ability was slowed down substantially to allow it to properly mimic every electrical current, explaining this difference. You are able to craft items that immediately show the maintaining energy levels in burning wood. Through a torch, under normal circumstances, you are able to use wood as fuel, and it burns away seemingly like normal. But when you make a torch with wrapping it with cloth and smothering it with flammable animal fat, you create a torch that never goes out, showing that the wood and the materials used needed a little boost to activate its infectious side effect that was dormant till you helped it activate. And since you can't find material that creates torches that will not have the torch burn forever, that again confirms everything is infected. Which you can also see from your mods for your weapons. The Flaming Head mod constantly has your weapon on fire without any sign of an energy source, so clearly humans have learned to harness the energy source in useful ways. With this, we can now start piecing together the fall of humanity. In the past, at some point, this unidentified energy source infected things on planet Earth. It is unknown what was initially infected, where did it initially appear, but that question does not matter, as this energy source actively spreads, which has to have happened due to it infected everything. So whether it was released on purpose, accidentally, or by no fault of anyone, it then spread and spread until eventually some of those infected things ended up in humanity's trade routes, which there were before humanity fall varying levels of inspection standards. But with how this energy source clearly would be something humanity's ever seen before, they would not be looking for it no matter how strict the standards are. Which it clearly being invisible early on, it must have had been in a dormant looking state, not changing anything significantly, as copying the state of the energy levels in electronics without damaging it would require a very slow, gradual buildup, and clearly, since your character isn't harmed by it, able to stand around clearly infected items with no ill effect, humanity basically had very little chance that they identify the infection for a long time. So having them accidentally spread the energy source no matter how strict they were in the inspection standards. But after a while, since the energy source eventually turns into a built-in power source, and over time displacing more and more energy to eventually become the sole power source without damaging it and increases the durability to amazing levels. One of the earliest signs of infection would be the products would be turned into a high quality version of what they were before. Infection, making no matter how cheaply built the things were, originally they'd be known to last longer and use less electricity, if they use electricity at all, easily outcompete even the most high quality competitors, so would be in a high demand, having companies that are selling infected products thrive, sending the infection worldwide, which then would leach into the environments around the world from wherever the humans are, which they are everywhere. Such an equality increase probably determined which companies were the dominant force, with how little effort they would need for quality control when all the products are turned into top-of-the-line versions. So I do expect the dominant businesses we see in this game will probably be the main source of spread of the energy source, though that doesn't prove they knew they were responsible, just at the least give it an unfair advantage, which, with how people say an easy money solution to corner the market, would be prone to not asking too many questions and to hide the trade secrets, as it clearly showed no harm to the customers. Then eventually, bizarre reports of unknown source of electricity keeping electronics on and wood not stopping producing heat would be heard of, as the infection had enough time to get close to that very noticeable energy maintainability it has. But since energy cannot be created nor destroyed, and there'll be a time no known power source that could explain it, these reports would be dismissed for a while, but eventually appear enough that some of the infected things would be brought to society's military and research facilities, confirming it is real. At that point we can assume they would investigate, but it was already too late, as it spread far too much, infecting basically everything around the entire world. And they will notice with the infected electronic devices becoming more efficient over time to reach being the sole power source for those electronics levels. The energy source would look to be getting stronger, making human society higher-ups now have to implement drastic measures. Since the containment was out of the question, humanity was facing an unable to be stopped world terraforming event, which is the process of turning the planet's ecosystem into something else. In this situation, the question that needs to be quickly answered is whether the human race can survive those changes, which with how it already spread to everything and is becoming more powerful over time, they would believe there was no time to waste, and with how bad the end result could be. If you explore the Navis game, you would have seen countless examples of ill-fated experiments on the infection, but about all of it was just focused on enhancing or understanding in humans, showing society was prioritizing trying to see what the advanced stages would be before it happened. For humans, with these experiments taking place in almost every secret lab and public lab within the not shown to the public part of them. This would all back up the theory society would be desperate to understand if humans could survive the world terraforming event. First, before anything else, we can see no signs the news had talked about the anomalous energy source, with not a single newspaper article showed they called it in any form the energy source, or shown the general population knew society higher-ups had known about the threat well before the zombie outbreak. Yes, none of the headlines indicated at all, just that zombie apocalypse was happening, seemingly catching the entire world off guard. And things were bad. So it does look like there was a cover-up, which at the point society found out about the energy source, it would have infected almost the entire food supply, infrastructures, environments, and probably everyone. So it wouldn't directly help the population, telling them as they can't avoid infection, but instead telling them would create a massive level of paranoia, as everyone would want to try and avoid everything to attempt to avoid infection, or avoid becoming more infected, so everything would scare them away. Therefore, society would not be able to organize quickly to figure out anything about the energy source if they allowed such a panic to happen. Since the higher-ups knew they needed to get as close to a full-blown global effort as possible, they hid it from the general population except for ones that could help with their efforts, explaining the many hidden from the public labs you find, working on understanding the infection, but due to the fact that at a certain point the end of the world would be happening, which the people who would know the truth at the time would probably try to leak and tell the population directly, since there was absolutely no reports talking about it. The end had to have been quick enough to not allow this to happen. Therefore, the energy source transitioned from a harmless form to a world-ending form very quickly, which, since in-game you can stop the infection with simple antibiotics, so easily counterable if able to handle the zombies with high-powered guns. Alone or within a small group, this indicates there was a threat early on that is long gone by the time your character starts their adventure. With the amount of experiments they did, it is clear there would be results from those efforts that you should be able to observe. You can observe the humans you run into that aren't zombies seem to act and look normal, but when you observe the many other animals that are not zombies who did not have the intelligence to avoid any side effects of the energy source, you basically can tell they are all basically mentally retarded. You can see the rabbits and chickens when they do their normal behavior of searching for danger and other types of behavior. These animals, even if you run at them, have a lot of trouble transitioning from what they were doing to running away, as if their brains are damaged. You can fire projectiles at them and barely miss, but every time, they completely are shown to not even react at all, despite how violent and obvious the projectile hitting so close to them was, showing the severe mental problems that before they would have infected would have had them panic running in any direction, instead of allowing you to aim your next shot. You can see those rabbits and chickens get scared off, then casually walk back in the way of danger. The birds everywhere puts their nest on the ground, instead of trees, as if they have the instinct to make the nest, but just can't handle doing it right. And predators never take advantage of it, allowing these birds' population to thrive, showing they are mentally damaged. It is clear the normal instincts are missing considerable amounts of brain activity. So something removed it from all of them. Though you can't do an autopsy and study them in game, you can still tear out pieces of meat from them, then store the meat with no preservatives in unrefrigerated containers, which it will be equally as edible on day one to any point in the future, showing an extreme level of infection from the energy source with a strong preservation side effect that is seen with everything else that is infected. Even the long since been dead, rotting carcasses clearly have a significant amount of what looks to be fresh meat and blood. So clearly, since they are preserved, which this energy source preserves, they are heavily infected. But since the energy source does replace the energy, which living creatures are extremely complex, there'd be basically no chance the energy source would be able to do it in a way that wouldn't cause disruptions without severe intervention, which can easily, as it goes through the animals not smart enough to figure out a way to manipulate the problems of being infected, would have the most complicated parts. The brain would have been severely disrupted, leading to a high chance of mental damage if they survived, explaining the difference between them and the humans, survivors who were able to intelligently avoid side effects. But there was no way for humans to avoid all side effects. Through the healing system in 7 days to die, we can observe broken bones from falling from a several-story high building take a couple days to heal completely if the victim takes it easy with no medical treatment, which medical equipment are naturally effective. Even food items heal extremely quickly. So that means the humans have a massively powerful regenerative ability that can be assisted to heal much quicker, which humanity shows they figured this out and are producing products that help. Which, since we can find these products in areas that were clearly taken by zombies and never retaken by humans. This shows human efforts to understand the virus had been going on for a long time prior to the end. The animals that are seen don't regenerate health like humans do, but instead have the body refuse to let the meat decompose normally. So both can be considered to be in a similar category of the body's integrity is increased drastically, but since humans intelligently altered how this infection would affect them, we can assume the one regenerating actively and the other preserving actively could have been the same thing being placed in both of them, but done in a different way, causing different results. We can observe similar symptoms in irradiated zombies, which are the strongest, which doesn't come as a surprise that they display the most amount of energy, with how they glow with radioactive material, so this had to be an advanced stage of the energy source infection, allowing the regeneration ability to appear, which the surviving humans had been able to figure out this regenerability in less harmful ways. And lastly, since your character and everything doesn't sleep, which sleep is due to growing imbalances that can harm you if you attempt to stay awake for too long, the energy source preservation and healing ability would explain why no one needs sleep anymore, as it actually preserves and stabilizes things, which includes you can labor in a mine for years without a break as long as you have food and water, showing an active preservation and regenerative ability. From animals, zombies, and humans, none of them sleep, and none get exhausted, needing a large amount of rest, so all indicate they are infected with the same thing. And now, for the last part, let's piece this together to show the energy source explaining the zombies. The preservation of body parts would explain why the zombies' dead bodies aren't decaying past a certain point. The regenerative ability would be able to repair a lot of damage to allow the body to retain some of its functionality, even with the rotting and death the zombies went through to get to that point. And the energy source replaces the natural energy fueling these preserved and held together enough parts to have them function. It clearly isn't perfect, so would have severe mental damage, as shown in healthy animals' retardation, which is much worse, as the brain would have went through far more with their bodies expiring, which clearly describes a zombie. We can also easily observe the normal-looking zombies are slower and less powerful than the ones with an extreme amount of energy glowing from their eyes, and then the radioactive, highly energized filled zombies are the most powerful. Therefore, we can observe that differences in energy buildup is a key factor to how strong the zombies are. Therefore, the energy source is probably the culprit, especially since for the radioactive zombies, there was nowhere near enough radioactive material that can explain how much they are glowing. Therefore, something powered it up, which has to be the energy source. That seems to be all the information stored here, so I'll end my video here. As I said before, this video was designed to be a basic introduction, which I think I reached a good stopping point, with showing just enough for you to be able to see the energy source hidden in plain sight, and that it caused a zombie outbreak. Which, with this video game being in development for about 10 years, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that they have been placing in the main storyline by now. So finding out things like this shouldn't come as a surprise. The next video will be the first of 3 more videos that will be going into depth into what the energy source actually is, what it has done, and to as best as I can piece together the rest of the story of 7 Days to Die. This has been the Deer Runner, the Runner of Deer. Thanks for watching.